Members of the National Assembly from Bayelsa State have called on the President, Major General Muhammadu Buhari, to declare a state of emergency on the floods that have ravaged parts of the state. Now, whilst addressing journalists in Abuja on Monday, the lawmakers read a joint statement titled Press Release on the Devastation Caused by the 2022 Flood in Bayelsa State, noting that the Bayelsa caucus was fully abreast with the multi-faceted and perilous times confronting Bayelsans as occasioned by the perennial floods that have sacked homes and entire communities.
Now, here is what we know about the floods in Bayelsa, and of course in other parts of the country. There are reports, about 600 plus, that had, died as a result of these floods in more than 30 states in the country at this time. And of course, Bayelsa, which has a population of about 1.7 to 1.8, less than 2 million people as at the last census, reports that more than 700,000 people, 700,000 of this 2 million, have currently been displaced. So it just puts it in perspective to show you how bad the situation is. And these are families in both the urban and rural areas that have been greatly affected by the flooding in Bayelsa. We've been showing you clips.
The effects of the flooding cannot be overemphasized. I spoke with someone who currently lives in Yenagoa yesterday, and I wanted to get a clear picture of what the situation is right now. She was saying to me that they're sort of cut off. They're cut off from Port Harcourt, they're cut off from, other parts of the South, and it just feels like they're on their own. Now, what this means is there's an increase in the cost of feeding, an increase in the cost of petrol. And she was saying to me that a liter of petrol cost about 1,000 naira in some places if you're lucky to get fuel from the filling station, and then 4,000 naira from the black market. It's quite sad.
Also, just to paint a clearer picture, we have a guest joining us, Dr. Ekiyor, who's going to be joining us in a bit to share his views on these issues. And of course, we'll also maybe paint a clearer picture. Good morning, Dr. Ekiyor. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, and how are you over there?
Very well, thank you.
So quickly, share with us, what the latest is, with regards to the situation in Bayelsa, and has the government done well enough at this time?
Sorry, I'm not sure I hear what you said. Could you just repeat that?
Now you're a victim of this, right? You have suffered from this.
Okay, yeah. So the entire Ekiyor land is affected, and I'm not an exception. Patani local government, Bomadi local government, Sagbama local government, Yenagoa local government, both in Delta and Bayelsa, part of Brutu, Kwale, and part of River State are all underwater, completely underwater. So it's akin to what has been happening in Lokoja. And the pattern is the same because it's the same River Niger flowing all the way into the ocean. And property is worth millions of naira gone, people displaced, hundreds of thousands of people displaced. Really, I think the only place where people habit now is bridges on the east-west road and certain very high grounds, and then story buildings that are still surviving. We use both water people, so we just managed to quickly adjust with canoes for those who have story buildings. But that's not solving the problem. There's the humanitarian crisis, there is hunger, there's diseases now, and this is a national emergency. Unfortunately, I don't think the federal government sees it as such. I expected that by now, there would have been a declaration of national emergency in the areas affected. This flood is hitting about 16 states in the last count, since it started in a couple of months back. Nothing is being done as to what should be done in civilized climate where people are victims of natural disaster of this nature. So I'm affected. I can imagine that my case may even be, okay, so let's say because I have a large property, so I probably will have to do a lot of renovation in the future and spend more money to get back to my normal life. But just imagine a cottage farmer or a simple average Niger Deltan who lives in a mud house and probably have just that house and a little farm at the backyard for sustenance and survival. At the end of this flood, such a person will return to nothing. You may not even find traces of the person's home. Farmlands for sustainable farming are all gone. Commercial farms are gone. I have fish ponds, about 13 of them for commercial fish farming. That's history now. What about animal husbandry? Those who have animals, goats, rams, cows in their backyard for survival. Nobody knows where those things are. Everybody has absconded away because there was no time to even make plans to move. You wake up one morning, you find that your bed is underwater and you start running away from your life. People also have drowned because they ill prepared for it. particularly those who are not good at swimming. So it's a national calamity, and something needs to be done ASAP.
Dr. Ekiyor, you're currently, outside Bayelsa State, as a result of this disaster. It's not also the first time that Bayelsa is experiencing a situation like this. Was there any preparation by government, by NEMA? Was there any warning to, residents of these communities before this happened?
Wow, I don't know. Is it network?
Can you hear me now?
No, is it network? I think I'm having some issue with the audio.
Okay, well, I'm asking, if there was any warning by the government or by the National Emergency Management Agency before this disaster happened, where the residents in these areas, in Nembe or in Ogbia, were they warned of a possible flooding?
Dr. Chris, are you with us? Seems we might have lost.
Yeah, okay. I heard that if people were warned. What I think is that people have lived all their life in this area, and it's not a floodplain, as it were. Hundreds of years we've lived in all those places, in Nembe, in Patani, in Bomadi. We were born there. I lived there all my life, went to school and came back. They built my homes there. It's that there is a sudden what you call climate change that's affecting the river course in the River Niger and River Benue, and that the government is complicit in trying to respond to those changes. If you take a tour of the River Niger and River Benue today, it's very, very shallow. So you used to have a river bowl that is large enough to take all these volumes of water and then disperse into the ocean, that is now very shallow, as against what it used to be 10 years, 20 years, 50 years down the line. And there has not been any attempt by government to desilt deliberately what is done in other climes. When you have a river course that is beginning to change course because of sandbanks and sand being deposited, governments of civilized clime will begin to try to recreate, recanalize, and ensure that there's smooth water flow over these places. Now, beyond the sandbanks taking over the water, there are areas also where water lilies have also clogged the flow of water. So what you have now is when those volumes begin to come from Futujalon all the way through Niger Republic into Nigeria, and perhaps the release of those volumes from the Cameroon dams, our own water course is so shallow now that the volumes hitting the River Niger and River Benue overflow their banks and then percolate into rivulets and small canals that then go and run trip back into communities that are at sea level with it. Hitherto, those areas where we are built on were known as dry land, not when in the rainy season where they flooded. In my own case, where water comes to my house, it's not even from the river, it's from the forest. It comes from all the way down through the forest into the community before the river even overflows its bank. So where we are now is a crisis where, except the River Niger and River Benue is totally and completely dredged and opened up, and except the river banks are also reclaimed in such a way that those sand that you used to dredge are then used to create artificial sandbanks, this would be a continuous national disaster for all of us. Of course, that's the easiest choice because you can't move hundreds of thousands of people running into perhaps millions from their community, the aborigines, into new lands. You will create a new conflict because wherever you are taking them to, there are owners of those land either too. And we're spared, for instance, in Delta State, our 7 local governments are now affected. Are you going to move 7 local governments away? Bayelsa State, almost all the entire 8 local governments, let's say about 2, may be spared. So how do you move those people? You give them new states? So we must deliberately find natural means and methods to deal with natural problems. And one of it is the dredging. The other one will be a building of a holding gate control dam so that you find a way to release this water in a manner that it can slowly but steadily be dispersed into the sea. Otherwise, this will be...
I mean, you're speaking about a dam. Unfortunately, we have reports that a dam has been built or is being built and is 90% complete, and we don't know when it will be complete. But this dam has been in construction since 1982, and it's 40 years later, yet nothing has been done. So you've really raised very important points. Let's also talk about the safety. Now, we had reports that we heard that a crocodile entered into your house. Is this correct? Give us a picture of what it is like, safety of Bayelsans, wild animals, snakes and all that. Is there any provision for their safety, for their rescue, and an actual picture? You've painted a picture for us, but if you'd color it a little further to let us know what, how this impacts those who are at the low class, those who are in the middle class. I was sharing earlier about someone who was giving me the price of petrol. So I'd like you to speak on this.
All right, thank you. So yes, the flood is not sparing man or animals or plants. It's done with everything, including infrastructure. Roads have been cut off completely. So you can't get into, for instance, Bayelsa, because there's a section of the road from Port Harcourt to Yenagua that is cut. You can't get into Patani in Delta because there's also another section cut there. You can't go beyond Patani to Bomadi because the section has been cut there. First of all these field sections of the road are also an indication of poor infrastructure. Why is it so? The contractors dealing with the East-West Road themselves have used clay to create ridges, and they fill that with sand without reinforcing those side shoulders. So now those mud that they use to create the banks have been dissolved, and the sand are just silting out, and then the overlay on those sand reinforcement is just collapsing. We saw, when I was trying to get to my village, we saw vehicles just caving into, as if it's a landslide, caving into places. So there is an economic loss, there's a social loss, there's a moral, mental case. You wake up and then everything you have invested is gone. You don't even know where to start from. This is a country where insurance really is not effective. Even if you had insured this property, you go to court for 100 years before they will agree to pay you your insurance cost. So a lot of things have to do with government policy. The most affected are women and children. Most women who are widows probably will have nowhere to go to. Most children are shocked because this is not what they know. And then, of course, even the upper class has its own setback. People have tried to individually build new places in their homes to make it look like a modern town, metropolitan, and spent investments in those places. I, for instance, probably have a small guest house where people can go and stay when they are visiting home for holiday. All of that is underwater. I don't even know where to start from. Hospital, I have a community hospital for the purpose of backing up what the government is doing, because most general hospitals are not functional in this Niger Delta area. They're just there as buildings. So I set up a small community-based hospital. The entire hospital is underwater. What we had to do was to move canopies on top of the bridge to ensure that we continue to produce and provide medical care for people right now at no cost, because you can't even ask people to pay you. There's no money, there's no food, there's no water. You can't, all the body of water is contaminated. You have septic tanks, hospital morgues, waste pipes, all now in a body of water running into people's homes. And then the reptiles, of course, would move from lower ground to higher ground. So their new abode will be people's rooftop, rails, window rails, and all of that. Yes, I found snakes in my house. And I think that people have found other dangerous reptiles around. So even staying within the house now, it's riskier than staying out there on the highway on where people are living. Because if you are in your house and you have to sleep with snakes, anything can happen. They'll be hungry, so they'll look for prey, and you could just be their prey. And then, of course, one new thing we found was that there were very rare species of animals that had been far away in the wilderness. For instance, I can't remember seeing a deer or a deer in the neighborhood. Suddenly, we found deers floating in our community, and people are using them for meat and food. They have died. We don't know the cause of death, but people did not care. They feed on those things. And those who have animals in their backyard, now people also are chasing them. So this flood has brought about even loss of moral standard, because some people are so hungry they are willing to also steal whatever they find in the neighborhood. Ordinarily, they may not steal. Now, your vices have been introduced to it. Sicknesses, waterborne diseases, diarrhea, dengue fever, malaria, all of those things are now beginning to resurface with rapid succession, tooling and all of that. So there must be need for the government not only to immediately now, first of all, engage qualified NGOs to intervene. This is not about government people going to play politics with this. Let us go and share bread and rice and then let's work. We know people who have some certain skills, set skills to respond to emergencies. NEMA needs to work with NGOs. NEMA needs to work with people who have been doing this kind of job before and set up it quickly. Emergency response camps for medical intervention, for food relief, and then later the government can use its government people to begin to talk about resettlement of people and supporting people to build new homes. The government at all levels must be involved. Well, be it the agencies like NEMA, the Ministry of Humanitarian Service, the international oil companies, the NNPC, their subsidiaries, the state government, the ecological fund, and of course the government must begin to talk to global agencies who support this kind of flood victim positions to help to build new homes. It is a national calamity. and must be seen as such.
Dr. Chris Ekiyor, thank you so much for your time. Our heart really goes out to you and to the people of Bayelsa, as well as those in other parts of the country who have become victims of the flooding. And we do hope that the government is listening and doing something to rescue the situation urgently. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, but I'd like to add a note. It's not just Bayelsa, it is Rivers, Bayelsa, Delta,
Yes,
parts of Edo.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
need to know that.
Yeah, all the parts, there are several other parts around the country. It's been a situation that has become some form of a disaster, and we hope that it is rectified as soon as possible. Thank you for your time with us.
All right, and of course, in the last few hours, the federal government has also put out statements ordering the National Emergency Management Agency to release 12,000 metric tons of food items from the National Strategic Reserve for distribution to communities. We're going to have further discussions on this.